Everyone. Here we are already in week 7. So I want to shift away a little bit from looking at uh, different nutritional components like proteins, fats, carbohydrates, sugars, etc., to taking a look at what the impact of what we grow and how we grow things on the environment uh, happens to be. So we're going to take a look today at, the way we used to farm with the family farm, and then move into uh, today's industrialized agriculture. Right? Where does our food come from? It used to come from the family farm, right? People would farm the land and grow the food and um, ship it to different areas, and food was seasonal. You could only get certain things at certain times and so on. But we kind of have ended the family farm for a lot of different reasons. The land is valuable, and it's a lot easier, right, to sell the land or develop the land than actually having to farm it. So we live in the kind of agricultural belt of the country where most of our grains and things like that are grown. Um, Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Idaho, very rich soil. Illinois, for example, that's why we're called the prairie state. Used to grow, have a lot of prairies. Over 90% of our prairies are gone now. So we have a very fertile topsoil here in Illinois and amongst those agricultural states. So people, came from Europe and they brought seeds, of course, of um, fruits and vegetables and things that they like to eat in the countries of their origin. So we had a very diverse type of agriculture where people were growing a lot of different things on their farms. We call that a polyculture, right? Poly is many. So a wide variety of things were not only being grown, but a variety of animals were being raised on the land, and they were, eating the grasses and given different um, grains to feed off of. So, very productive life. You look back 100 years, 25% of all Americans, right, lived on a family farm. Um, and the general kind of rule of thumb was that you would grow enough food to feed you and your family, and then 12 others, so that farmers could sell to other farmers, barter and trade, whatever, with their food source. Today we see, that family farm being replaced by industrialized agriculture. Um, we became obsessed, right? We had to produce more food, so we had to produce higher yields of foods, and um, people started to grow one type of crop rather than many different crops. So you became a corn farmer or a um, potato farmer, or whatever it happened to be. And this, of course, made our crops into what we call a monoculture, right? Where you're only growing one thing on a farm. And we also saw the family farm go away, and we saw these massive um, farms where you only had one type of animal, either a pig farm or a cow farm or chickens, and you could be raising 1 million chickens or 2 million chickens, a couple 100,000 pigs, and so on. So, 100 years ago, 1920, we were getting about 20 bushels, let's say, of corn an acre, to now we get over 200, 10 times that amount of bushels of corn um, per acre, mainly because of our ability to increase the number of stalks on a corn plant. Another thing that we switched from, we used to have pesticides and fertilizers that were natural, and we made the switch instead to chemical pesticides, um, which ended up killing a lot. We would get a lot more of the food source per acre because we would have fewer pests. So this became kind of an easy way of spraying chemical pesticides on, and you'd get that perfect fruit or perfect vegetable, and that's kind of what um, farmers were looking for. Um, Soil fertility, we have to maintain putting um, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, um, and nitrogen back into the soil so that the soil will stay rich. So remember, we need that topsoil, rich topsoil, in order to plant. So we began to crop rotate, right? If corn took out a lot of carbon from the soil, then maybe the next year, instead of planting corn, we would plant uh, potatoes, let's say, because those would take hydrogen out of the ground. And then we would put nitrogen back in. We would need to put nitrogen back in. So we'd put soybeans. That actually is the only way to get nitrogen into your soil in a natural way, is to plant some sort of legume. Usually it's soybean. So we began to cycle different elements, like I said, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, all of those kind of cycle in the same way, right? Gets in the soil, uh, the element gets transferred to the tissue of the plant gets eaten by an animal, the element gets then transferred to the animal. They all kind of do this the same way, except for nitrogen. With nitrogen, we have to plant a legume so that there is bacteria that are found on the root systems of our legumes that what we call fix the nitrogen in the soil, or convert atmospheric nitrogen in the form of ammonium into a form of nitrogen that can be converted in such a way that then it can be transferred to the tissue of the animal. So, what happened in manure, well, it was a natural fertilizer. So it would be spread on the land. Well, of course, that's very labor intensive. So we made the switch when we went to industrialized agriculture. Instead of using a natural fertilizer like manure, we began to use the chemical fertilizers. And there's a whole, process for running through the type of fertilizers that are out there. And then, we made the creation, as I mentioned, of the monoculture, where we lost our diversity and in crops and animals. And now, we see plants raising one type of animal or growing one type of crop. The farms get bigger and bigger, right? Corn kind of takes over the farming system in the Midwest. We have places like Iowa that had very fertile soil becoming food deserts because all they were growing was stock corn that could be fed only, wasn't good for eating, it wasn't sweet, um, and it would be fed to animals. So they, cows and pigs and stuff, instead of uh, being able to move around and graze on grass, which is natural for them to do, they were staying in one place and being fed the stock corn. And consequently, then Iowa uh, began to import most of their food, vast majority of their food. So we grow a lot of corn, right? We use corn for a lot of different things. We have seed corn. Corn goes into different products. We have the gasohol, which has a corn base to it. A lot of our food products, alcohol, we use corn for a lot of different things. So farmers began to grow more and more of it. And oil, we shifted from being sun powered, all of our crop growing, to being oil dependent, right? Big, huge tractors and combines and things like that that needed oil and gasoline in order to farm. You know, how can farmers survive if they're not making a profit? Well, they don't make a profit um, because corn and any corn-based product is extremely cheap. So, and it became obviously much cheaper to feed corn to our pigs and cows and chickens than to allow them to graze and pick out things, eat grass, and so on. So we subsidize corn very much. Farmers get paid per bushel for the amount of corn that they produce. And some are paid not to produce corn at all so that they can keep control over the price of a bushel of corn. That's why you're seeing a lot of these farmers who were paid not to produce corn putting wind turbines on their land um, so that the electric companies can use the land in order to produce electricity. So lots of different problems with corn, right? It requires a large amount of nitrogen, so we have to make sure that we're, not planting every other year so that we can get soybean in there for that crop rotation. Corn uses a lot of chemical fertilizers, a lot of chemical pesticides in order to keep it to a point where, everybody wants the perfect ear of corn. Our chemical fertilizers, after World War I, when we got the making of gas that we used as a weapon, Fritz Haber came up with the Haber-Bosch process where we could produce chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and we still use that process today. So, unfortunately, those pesticides are really not very good for our bees. Bees are our number one pollinator, so we have to look at what that shift has done for those particular pollinators. So take a look when you can at some of the cycles, element cycles, nutrient cycles that we look at today. Blue baby syndrome is something else. If you have an interest, you might want to take a look at. And we did already look at the dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, and we looked at shrimp farms and catfish farms, salmon farms, stuff like that. But this red area, is an indicator that this is a dead zone where fish and shrimp and things like that are not getting enough oxygen in the soil or from not getting enough oxygen in the water, and consequently there's no fish or anything like that. And the reason for that is the sediment. Here you can see the state of Louisiana. We've got the Gulf of Mexico right here, and sediment and things laden with chemical pesticides get washed into the Gulf here and cause that breakdown of dissolved oxygen. Just another look at what the dead zone kind of looks at, but everything kind of gets deprived of oxygen and consequently ends up dying off. One of the other things with pesticides is that they're not discriminating. So while they have some benefits, there are also negative pieces to them also. They kill everything. So we have to be careful with that. And then we get resistance, right? The first time we sprayed pesticide on, we may kill, let's say 4 out of 5 insects, but that one survives, right? And then passes that survival gene on to their next generation. So then they both survive and they pass on to their next generation. And soon we have pest resistant crops that nothing ends up, being able to kill. So it really renders that pesticide useless, right? And as I said, it's not discriminating. So, it's killing the good insects right along with the bad insects. And then the last piece, if you want to take a look at this, is what we call colony collapse disorder, where pesticides are killing honeybees, which we know are one of our at the top of our food chain, and they're our number one pollinator. So without pollinators, it's going to be difficult to have natural flowers and vegetables and fruits and things like that. So if you have an interest in bees, a lot of people are into bee keeping nowadays. Might be something that you want to take a look at. Why we should care that bees are undergoing what we call this colony collapse disorder, or CCD. Not quite sure what it is, but we think that it has something to do with the pesticides. So take a look at that when you get a chance. That is going to be it for week 7. Here we are already. If I can answer any questions once you take a look at these PowerPoints, let me know, and I'll post the week 7 assignment. Until next week, I'll see you guys later.